coming.
First. Okay.
All right. Well, let's
Welcome.
kick
Oh, well,
off.
hang on. I should do an intro first. So let me introduce the amazing Stephanie Thompson, who I first met through my partner Dave, because she has written a book called The Day My Vagina Broke, which is potentially the best title I've ever heard for a
Here it
podcast.
is.
Yes, she had a birthing injury and then started a group called Brave Mama, which has been supporting women who have had trauma in their births. And since then she started a podcast and got it all paid for before she even started. And I imagine that's where this comes in. So over to you, Steph, and you can tell everyone a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Jules. I'm really honored to be here with all of you today, and to know that some of you are podcasters or considering a podcast idea is amazing. I'm just going to share my screen because I do have a slide deck to share. So I'll just grab that now. Won't be a minute. Now, we practiced this and the tech worked perfectly. So of course it may not. Oh, it did.
Perfect. It's worked perfectly again. Well done.
Fabulous. That's always a bonus. Okie dokie. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
All right. So what I would really love to do is, let's just start either with a show of hands, like who here is in the driver's seat of their own business? Great. All of us. Amazing. So, because sometimes we talk to people who are also in the co-pilot seat, or they're a business partner. So it's just nice to know who's kind of in the room. Did we have the chat function here, Jules, by the way?
We do, yes. I'm just
Okay.
I'm loath to put it up right now because I think it might go into it might stop my recording, because I'm recording onto the computer of my view. But
Cool.
yes, the chat is there.
Let's not. I mean, look, we've got this beautiful, small, intimate group.
Yeah.
I think we can interact just by doing the show of hands or a thumbs up. I don't think we need to type in the chat per se. Sure. And plus, then we don't want to interrupt the artist.
No, but you're welcome to if people type in the chat, you can have it up. So
that's all.
But anyway, ask us.
So I guess, and we kind of have touched on it a little bit before we hit record, but I would like to know, if just by show of hands, if you have thought of starting your own podcast. Great. Or you already have one, which we know. So those questions are kind of redundant, but it's just not knowing who is coming. But yeah. So I guess for those who have not started yet, the reasons might be it feels too big. Or for those of us who are already in it, the commitment, and then we're not sure if it's actually going to add that level of return on investment that we put into it for our business growth, right? But it is great to see we're all in the right place. Now, let me just, oh, great. It's working. So good when technology works.
It is.
So what I just want to do is share a few really quick facts with you about podcasting before we get down to the money part, which is, I know it's the reason why we're all here. But we have over 500 plus million podcast listeners by the end of 2024 is the prediction. When we think about it, that is a lot of ears, right?
Yep.
We also know that...
million ears. What did you say? It was 500,000, so it's a million ears, or it should be.
500 million. Yeah, that's right. And we know that, I love this saying that, bingers are buyers. So people who listen to podcasts end up making purchases, and podcasts really do spur purchases. We also know that our podcasting is a great tool that we can use for community building around our message. And I know that will resonate with a few of you here in particular. But I love the but. Here is what most podcast agencies are not telling you, is with over 500,000 podcasts being churned out every single year, only 20% will survive. Right. So, look, I'm really sorry to say that 80% of our podcasts have a really good chance of failure. Now, of course, what failure looks like exactly in the podcasting space and why does it happen? Like, we're going to touch a little bit on that today, but more importantly, what I want to do is take you on the journey and start talking about how to ensure that your podcast journey, when you start your podcast journey or continue your journey, that you're aiming to stay in that top 20% and you are able to have success with your podcast. Okay, so I know Jules has done a beautiful introduction, but hi there, I am Steph Thompson. I like to think of myself not so much as a subject matter expert, but a real subject matter enthusiast, because I never stop learning how to get better. Sure, I've worn lots of hats, from 20 years in education and leadership to being a women's health advocate, an author and a podcaster like us. But let me tell you, it really boils down to one thing: getting shit done.
Love it.
I am all about making things happen, doing them really well, and getting paid for it unapologetically. And I just want to share a quick story with you that I remember. I've shared it with Jules recently, that I was in Sydney as a subject matter expert. I was doing filming for a major TV network. And as the filming was wrapping up, I looked around the room and I was like, so this segment could not have gone ahead without my expertise, but I'm the only person in this room not getting paid. The only person not getting paid. And I think that was when it really hit me. I made the decision there and then that I will no longer be the only person, especially the only woman in the room, not getting paid.
Yay! Love that.
If you take anything away from today, make sure it's that. And so and I really love that word unapologetic, because what I'm no longer sorry for is saying things like, what is the commercial arrangement before agreeing to anything? And I like this level of confidence that I now have, as Jules can attest to. I never had it before, but it really comes from my experience in podcasting partnerships. And so what I want to do today, and that's why we're here to talk about how podcasting, and specifically how to monetize your podcast before it's even launched. Now, when I say that, it doesn't discount anyone who already has a podcast, because if you have one and there's obviously some sticking points for you, a podcast relaunch is almost like starting from scratch in the eyes of partnerships. Okay, right. So rest assured, you'll be fine. Who's excited about that idea, about potentially having a partnership with funding before you've even started?
Me.
Yeah, awesome. We're all on the same page. And this is what I'm here to share with you today, because, I mean, look, of course, it's impossible for me to take absolutely everything that I have been coached through and taught and implemented over the last 4 years. But what I'm going to do is just take some big key elements to share with you what I think that are most important, so that you can go away and start to think about, is a partnership something that I really am ready for and want in my business?
Yeah.
So the first thing we're going to talk about, sorry, I did forget to mention somehow in my little notes here, I'm going to send you this slide deck. So if you feel like you can't take notes today or you're busy, totally fine. You'll have access to all of this information anyway. Right. So I'd love for us to be here and engage as much as possible. Also, if you have questions, we might hold them until the end, but write them down so you don't forget.
Yeah.
That's right. So the first thing I'm going to cover is when we talk about when is a good time for your podcast to start a partnership. And then next, we're going to talk about some things that you need to have ready before you even think about looking at a partnership. And then we're going to finish up on some tips on how to go and find it. Where do these partnerships exist in our world? It's much easier than you think. Yeah, so there you go. So you don't need to take notes. I actually just wrote it there. I jumped ahead. I'll share them with you after our lunch today. Okay. So here's the truth. I'm really all about pulling back the curtain and no bullshit. And so I hope it's okay to swear, Jules, by the way.
Of course it is. It's me. Of course.
I thought so, but I was going to say no BS. And I'm like, no, it sounds better to say there's just no bullshit. There's no,
that's right.
Smoke and mirrors. I mean, look, for most of us entrepreneurs and us in business, we are honestly so busy working and doing the business that working on our business is usually at the bottom of the list of things to do, right? So who can resonate with that? Yeah, I can see some nods there. So look, there is real merit in using the podcast medium to grow your business. I'm just going to touch on a few of the things where I think that make the most impact. We know that podcasts are the best way for authentic storytelling. And for those of us who are involved in that authentic storytelling, you would understand this. Podcasts give us a chance to really humanize our brand because you're really letting your clients hear the people behind the logo.
Yeah.
Right? It helps us create those really meaningful and deeper connections with our audience much quicker and look, if you think about it, you are in the most intimate medium ever. You are literally talking to your ideal client in their ear. And they're really highly engaged when they're choosing to listen to your podcast. You also don't have to battle the algorithms and lost in the social media space that seems to be just getting more and more crowded. Would you agree? Yeah. And I think one big realization with podcasts is that we realize that we are all so busy. We are constantly moving and doing. So if you think about, someone can listen to your message and your business and your values right in their ear as they're commuting to work, as they're doing their work, as they're spending time with their kids or cleaning the house, whatever it is, you've got the upper hand as compared to our traditional print media. People can't do that. So this is a lot of very powerful positives when it comes to podcasting for business. So I guess the big question for us right now is, do you need to have a podcast in your business? And do you need a podcast partnership? So I'm here to tell you that the level of impact for a podcast, you don't actually have to have your own show. You can have all of those things that I just talked about connection and all the things, without hosting your own ongoing podcast. And that's another thing that people aren't telling you. Because when we work with subject matter experts, we really take a deep dive to understand the position they're in right now, to decide, do they want to dip their toe into podcasting, like a little mini series potentially, or even just be a guest on someone else's show, before leaning right in with the full commitment of a podcast. And look, I'll share with you one of the guys that we worked with late last year. He came to us saying, I just want a podcast. He's in the tech space and he's got a startup. So he wants to be, look, yes, for business, but maybe a little bit for ego to keep up with all of his techie mates, right? So we spent 2 weeks with him. We took him through the whole conception process of what it takes to be in podcasting. And by the end of it, he got to know what was actually involved, but he also had a full stack of audio that we did with him so that he could then use it and repurpose it in his business now. He didn't have to commit to a full ongoing podcast before giving that a go. So just if you are thinking podcasting is big, and especially for those of you who have them now and it feels like a lot, you can still have an impact without having to have your own show. Just wanted to make sure. Try before you buy. Now, I just want to circle back a little bit here with the 80% of podcasts that end up in that, elephant graveyard. And in the podcasting world, it's called pod fade. Has anyone heard of pod fade? Okay. So basically it's when a podcaster comes out all guns blazing. Oh, I've started a podcast. Here it is. Listen to it. And they get about 7-ish episodes in and it just fades away, never to be heard of again. That happens more regularly than you would think. That's part of the 80%. Now, There's many reasons why that happens, and I'm pretty sure some of us experience it here. So you can run out of content ideas after 7 episodes. You have no clear strategy to begin with. You get put off by low downloads or no downloads even. This happens more often than you think, but falling out with your co-host, quick way to kill your show. And then the tech is too hard. And it's all of these reasons why like 80% of our podcasts end up there. But I'd be interested to know if any of you think, does any of you here think, what would be the number one reason podcasts don't survive? Have a guess. No wrong answers.
I would guess that it is people running, like they haven't thought it through, and so they either run out of guests or they're running it themselves, and so they run out of puff, or as you say, the technology starts to, they don't realize that it can be quite simple, or that you could get someone else to produce it, so it all gets too hard.
Yeah. Anyone else want to have a stab?
Maybe also irregularity, like lack of consistency.
Yeah.
I think also time cost, because you got to value time, and if it takes a lot of time to do.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Because there are some people, I know some people that spend a day doing the research and are getting their questions ready before a podcast, and which I can imagine would absolutely start eating into your time.
Yeah, and the profitability.
Yeah.
So the biggest reason, the number one reason, is that podcasters have that realization that it's actually really hard to make money in podcasting alone. And when you run out of money, that's when Jules is right, you run out of steam. That's when everything becomes too much, because you've got to connect all the moving pieces. And that's why, just as Rochelle said, you run out of time because it eats into your business time. So money is the reason that most podcasts end up in that 80%, because for podcasting to be profitable, in my opinion, it needs to be part of a greater business plan and strategy. Or there is, obviously leveraging the power of partnerships is the or, because I didn't have the business. Yes, I had Brave Mama, but as Jules knows, it was a passion project. It was not commercialized. I did it because I had purpose to change the childbirth and prolapse space. So I had no choice but to use that partnership method to be able to afford to pay for my producer and all the things that came with my podcast. Now, look, most of you have said you're already in business. And so let's find out if you are ready to start looking at a partnership for you. Is everyone good? We're on the same page here?
Yep.
Amazing. Let's just take a little bit of a deeper dive into what a podcast partnership could look like for you. I mean, it would be really nice to have the backing of a brand to grow your podcast and therefore your business.
Absolutely.
So let's just start with the first thing you need to do. And this is the process that I actually did myself. So you need to assess what you currently have in terms of things needed to be partner ready. We used to say partner worthy, but it has like a negative connotation. So it's partner ready or partner comparable. You know what I'm saying? Like, are you ready to do it? So the first thing is, you need to look at your business and who you are, what you do, and who you serve. I'm pretty sure most of you here know that already, but sometimes when we put a magnified lens on something in particular, we sometimes discover things like a secondary market segment that really wasn't obvious to us before. So this is a really good exercise to do that. The next thing we want to do is look at your current clients and also thinking about your ideal clients, because this is what we're working towards.
Yeah.
Not just in terms of their demographics per se, but what are their real pain points and how does your business solve those real pain points? And look, you probably do this in your annual planning, but it is a really nice way just to refresh yourself If your clients have changed over the years, if your market segment has shifted a little bit, it's nice to just do this activity. And our community. So what social media following do you have? Do you have an email list? Do you have maybe a private Facebook group? Like, so what is your business ecosystem? And how do they all connect with one another? Because that information is vital. Brands will ask for downloads. Yeah, we're going to get to that in a minute. But that is the information you need to know off the, really, really well before starting to think about your partnership. It paints a really good picture of where you're at. The second thing is, and I know it sounds really simple, like, what do you want out of a partnership? Most of us will say money, right? It feels like a no-brainer. But when we really like to take our clients on a deeper dive than this, because yes, money is needed, but quite often there's something much deeper that you can get from a partnership, and we just kind of shine a light on it to help you see it. It could be simply a cash injection for your project. That's fine. But you could also be looking to partner with a brand long-term with someone who is like-minded, so you can both grow together, right? And that's what a really good partnership will do. The possibilities are endless, and they're actually really exciting, which we're going to get to. Knowing what you need right now is the most important thing to know before you want to work out who you want to partner with. And I'll share this story with you because when I was being coached 4 years ago on how to do this, we pitched the podcast, the first partnership. I think we came up with an amount of money, like it was just plucked from the air. I think it was maybe 25K. And a little bit was for production, and a little bit was for PR, a little bit was for marketing. So we had this rough idea. And then when I pitched it and they came back and said, we don't have that budget, I was like, okay. With some negotiation and back and forth, we ended up going ahead and rinsing and repeating that process. I really realized something. When I became clear about what exactly I needed for my podcast, I pitched that exact amount, and that exact amount was successful. I think having a bit of a wishy-washy idea before, it didn't lead to the same success as when I was very clear about what I needed to make it happen.
Can I just ask you there what you mean by what you needed, as in?
So I needed the money to pay my producer, which was say $5,000. I knew exactly what it was. I needed to partner with a company that was much bigger than me, who had a much bigger audience, so they could share my podcast with the audience for growth. Things like I knew that certain brands had really good connections with the other brands I wanted to work with.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just really knowing.
Just being strategic about it.
Yes. Once you know what that is, you have a different energy. Yeah. You show up very differently when you say to a brand, oh, I need this, and this is how amazing it's going to be, rather than, oh, here's a figure. Yep. But we'll just see how that goes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And the third thing is, it's something that actually needs a little bit of a broader thinking here. If we had more time, I would do this activity, but see the picture of the palm trees on the slide? Has anyone heard of an activity called the, oh my God, I did the coconut, I meant to say palm grove, coconut grove activity. Has anyone done that? Okay, great. Because I actually borrowed it from a course I attended years ago. And we teach this in our podcasting partnership course live. People come in thinking, oh, my show is about periods. So I would partner with a tampon company, and it seems to make sense to them, right? Because it does. When we really kind of open our thinking in this activity, we say to our participants, all right, you've got this coconut grove. Now list 3 things that you could make from that coconut grove. And as you can expect, you'll see coconut cream, coconut milk, and beauty products, all the things that are probably in the forefront of your mind right now. When we take them through the process again, we end up with things like, a coconut shell bowl and cutlery and chairs. And we really kind of expand that thinking to the point where we get to the very outside the box ideas, including things like, you could host a wedding there. You could do a professional photography photo shoot in your coconut grove. So it's about really taking the blinkers off. And that is something that we teach, and we say to you, you really need to look at the things that aren't expected, because that's where the opportunities lie. And so how you can implement that with your potential partnership ideas is that you start with who you are, what you do, who you serve. You think about the brands that you could work with, where perhaps you could start with the lower level ideas of creating a social media post for them, right? You could help promote them in your newsletter or your email group. You could even maybe write a blog post and put it on your website about this particular brand, and logo placement, all those type things. When you go to the next level, we really show you that to broaden your ideas and think about it, like, do you have a book? Are you thinking of writing an ebook or an asset where the brand could, potentially write the foreword for you and be part of that with you? And I think, of course, in podcasting, the no-brainer is, yes, you're going to do an audio ad for them, right? That's like the bare minimum. But there's other things that you could also do with your podcast. Say, for example, you're having a launch. You could have them as your named partner. There are so many things that you could be looking at on how to work with a brand that is of value for them and of equal value to you. And look, just rest assured, most people in podcasting don't know that they already have these things. Like, you've probably already got so many valuable assets with you right now that it's just up to us to point them out to you. And if you don't have anything right now, we show you a way that you can really create highly valuable assets easily. So now let's have a chat about, how does one find their first partnership? Let's take a quick drink. Too much talking. So I actually fell into podcasting, funnily enough. It was never actually on the plan. It wasn't a part of the strategy. It came from my experience, as Jules mentioned, my book, The Day My Vagina Broke. And I learned the hard way when it came to social media and the word vagina. I was actually placed under a shadow ban. Does anyone know what a shadow ban is? Yeah. Yeah. So at the time, I didn't know what it was. And it just means like that metaverse didn't like what I was saying. And at the time, we were having 20 to 30 women request to join our private Facebook group daily. And it went to 0 overnight, zip, zilch. And that 0 continued for months and months, to the point where our team of volunteers, we had 3, we didn't need them because we just weren't, metaverse was not showing our stuff to anyone because of the word vagina. And I tell you, it was really frustrating, yes, but there was a really good lesson in that I needed to, and I think at the same time, the book was starting to take off. And
because of the title, so I would think. So it's really interesting, isn't it?
And I was getting the same types of questions in my DMs from the readers. And I thought, maybe we need to continue this conversation, but we need to do it in a way that is uncensored and unfiltered. And then cue the podcast idea. I was really lucky in the beginning, as Jules said, to have a good support network to help with the concept and get the idea out there. But the hardest part was knowing how how to get all the moving pieces working, because there's a lot involved. But then how else was I going to do it ongoing with 2 kids under 2, a physical disability, and no money? Like, there was no money. After just doing a book, I kind of also knew at that time, we went down the crowdfunding route to self-publish the book, and I wasn't going to do that again. Like, I'll do it once, and I didn't feel great about it, but we did it and it was done, and I wasn't going to do it for the podcast. And it was just like this serendipitous moment on socials where they say, oh, we're running a course on how to do a partnership to fund your projects. And I was like, oh my God, it's like you're in my head. So I attended the webinar, signed up for the course, had amazing coaching by one of our local female partnership coaches here in Australia, Katrina McCarter. And fast forward the 12 weeks, I was well underway to be getting my first paid partnership. Just on a side note, any information we're sharing today, you could apply this to any partnership. It doesn't specifically have to only be podcasting. Katrina taught us how to implement this with anything. I'm specifically talking about podcasting, but you absolutely could do it anywhere. And finding your first partnership is much easier than you think, because what we define as a partnership is an exchange of equal or very close to value. Now, this is very different to sponsorships. I think most of you would understand that a sponsorship is generally like, it's a one-way transaction. You get money to do a task, a social media post, a shout out, whatever it is. And we know influencers do that. They get paid to say they like a product, even when they don't. I think us consumers are onto this now more than ever. Like, we understand kind of how it works, this tactic. And it's not as lucrative as it used to be when the Kardashians were doing it years ago. So what we're finding is actually the exact opposite. If you've got a big audience, there's less engagement. If you have a smaller audience in a particular niche, there is a higher level of engagement. And that is what brands want, because they get their return on investment. And I think to get you started in the right direction of who you could possibly partner with, I'm just going to share some ideas with you. There's no particular order here, but think about who you'd like to partner with in the way, who's already in your immediate circle. I mean, who do you admire in your industry, where you are right now? Who are you already connected with? And that could be via LinkedIn or in business. And then who could you lean on to say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing. Do you think you might know someone who would be interested in talking with me about this? They're really great ways to start conversations about, where you're going to find this first partnership. The next thing to do is really start to look at the things that you use yourself to make business easier. And I've got a perfect example. We just finished up with a podcaster who has a community of entrepreneurs and online designers, I think they are. Now, they use online tools to organize their day. And this podcaster also uses that tool to organize her day and sees great value in it. So when we kind of unpacked all of that, she was able to pitch to that brand that they already use that she has an audience here who are highly engaged, very engaged, because she's very expensive. And she would love to have them on her podcast and also talk about them in her coaching sessions. Because what that is doing is that software company who have those organizational tools, that's exactly who they want to target. They want to talk to entrepreneurs who need to organize their day. And basically this podcaster was just giving them a lovely warm introduction because it made sense. Partnerships like this, they need to make sense for your clients and your audience for them to have the most impact. Now, it would be remiss of me to cover this. I know it sounds funny and you may get a giggle, but that's okay. I need to share with you some things to avoid when you're thinking of partnerships. These are real life examples. One of my favorite podcasters of all time, she used to be, her podcast is about self-help and self-development. And this one night, as I'm sitting in the bath listening to this episode, she does an advert for car tires. And I was like, am I listening to the wrong show? Car tires? Heck, it felt like a money grab and a sellout, to be honest. And it made me lose trust in her. And another woman who I loved her podcast, it was about women of color. It was a great show. She did an advert for cheese. I think it was like vegan cheese. And I was like, my mind is blown. Me as your audience, I'm here to learn about things. Cheese is not one of them. So when you are really thinking about what you do and your podcast, if you're a podcaster now, you're thinking about a podcast, really think about the companies and brands, organizations, foundations who align with your values, who align with your services, who align with your offerings, who potentially have similar audiences to you, and mainly who also meet the needs of your clients, right? As you start creating this list of these brands, you look through the lens of what would benefit your listeners. If you introduce this brand to them, what are they going to get out of it? What benefit are they going to have? And just start with one idea, because very quickly when you start with one, they will just start to drop in. And you, just like the coconut grove, there is nothing too crazy, except if you get to the point of riding tires and cheese. Just hear me on your shoulder saying no. So I wanted to just share with you, and to cement this concept of partnerships that make sense, I'm going to share just a couple of the partnerships that we've had over the years with my podcast. These were all based on our audience and my needs and wants at the time. Every single partnership here has been really successful. Some of them have had repeat monetary investment, to the point where one brand has just emailed me and said, "Hey, Steph, we're doing this thing. Here's our budget. Are you in?" And can I just tell you that feeling when you read that email? I just got goosebumps again. That someone believes in you and someone in a big brand actually back you and see the value in what you're doing. There's nothing like it, really. It's amazing. Now, some of these pictures, in full disclosure, some of these were non-monetary partnerships. And I know we're here to talk about money, but I do want to share this particular story that I think is going to be really helpful for you. You can see down on the bottom there, I partnered with Podbean. So Podbean is where I host my podcast. And we initially started a partnership because I didn't have the money to pay the hosting fees. It was as simple as that. And I said, "Hey, I've got this thing. I wonder if we could work together." And we had a great conversation. Now, initially, it wasn't of high value to my audience at the time. But over time, there were women in our group who found their voice, who knew their story, and were like, "I'm going to start a podcast too." And so we helped them do that. And of course, it made sense that at the end of our show, we say, "We'd like to thank Podbean, our podcasting host," or whatever it was, so that our listeners then say, "Oh, well, if I'm going to start a podcast, of course I'm going to host it on Podbean." So that's how the first partnership occurred, no monetary exchange. What they also did during that partnership was highlight my podcast as podcast of the week at the beginning of my season and at the end of my season, which, as you can imagine, it just went, it blew up, because they're across the globe. And when they highlight a podcast that's listener worthy, people listen, right? So there was, everyone got value from that. what happened then was we continued to work over the years in different avenues. And I was heading over to the podcasting conference in Vegas to meet up with some clients and some friends. And I got this WhatsApp message just as I'm kind of getting on the plane. It was one of the executives at Podbean, and they said, "Hey, Steph, I know this might sound bizarre, but we thought of you because we've just had one of our panel members pull out from the conference. Do you think you would like to jump up on stage and talk?" And I was like, heck yes. I applied to talk at this conference and got rejected. So by having this partnership and this connection, they knew how I worked. They knew my high standards. We were so connected that it was a no-brainer that she asked me to jump on stage. And that's what that photo is at the top. We had the best time. I can tell you that that experience was worth any dollar in partnership money I've had, because now we have created these relationships and connections and made real friends from this. And some of these other partnerships on this page, I would now call some of these people my friends rather than business acquaintances. So beyond the money, the opportunities are endless. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything on that one. Okay, so I think when it comes to talking about money and podcasts, just last month, we were able to negotiate a 10,000 USD partnership with a podcast that has not even launched yet. I mean, I think we sent her microphone last week, so she hasn't even picked up the microphone. And how? It's because we did all of the groundwork. So some of the points that I've touched on today, knowing who she is, knowing what she does, knowing who she serves, really unpacking who would be the right people to pitch to, meant that we could share the concept of the podcast, the trajectory of where it's going to go, and what she already had in terms of her audience. Now, that podcast launches in June this year. In those discussions, we really articulated that we understood the value of her current audience as being so engaged, and it went beyond a download, right? When you can communicate that value to a brand, it's what they need to hear, that there will be some level of return on that investment. So I think we mentioned before, like typically podcasters will say, brands will say to a podcaster, "So what's your downloads?" And they love to ask you that to gauge your value. This is why we named this talk Monetize Your Podcast Before You've Even Launched. Because when a brand asks you that and you say, "Oh, we don't have any because we haven't launched yet, but this is what we do have," because you don't have that data. So them asking for it becomes null and void. The data you do share with them is, who are your people? How engaged are they? How are they fed into your ecosystem in your business? And how you can potentially introduce them to this brand, because that still communicates that you are going to be giving them the value that they're looking for without a download. And look, here's the truth. If you have tens of thousands of downloads for your podcast, generally it's because you're famous anyway, to start with. But a download doesn't equal a purchase. Just because someone's listening to Joe Rogan's podcast doesn't mean they're going to buy what he's talking about straight away, you know? So they're the types of things that we talk about with brands. What it actually means for April, this podcaster, is that she's already ahead of the game, because now she's got the funds to be able to invest in her show that is going to make sure it gets to the level that she has communicated to that brand, and it will. Any partnership that you are considering right now needs to make sense. It needs to be strategically planned to be most successful. How are we all feeling about that right now? Am I scaring anybody off? We're good? Awesome. And look, the best part of partnerships, it's actually also a lot of fun. It can be a real fun activity to do, and you can have fun getting to know people. And like I said, those connections that I've made with a lot of these people are way more valuable to me than a dollar investment. So just to regroup, I'm going to kind of put it all together now. We've covered a lot in a really short matter of time. I tried to pick the most valuable things and aspects to share with you so that we've covered some common ideas why podcasting is such a powerful tool, but I think most of us in this room already know that to grow your business. I really wanted to lift the lid on what podcast agencies aren't telling you, that you don't need your own show straight away. Then we kind of jump straight into partnerships and what they are and what they're not, and how they're very different to sponsorships. We talked about how to know if you are partner ready, not worthy. Next, we kind of covered the steps on to get you thinking and get the, broadening the thinking about how you could partner with someone to grow your podcast. And then just lastly, I shared some of those examples of how to make your podcast partnership successful. So I'm going to finish up with a challenge for you today. I like setting a good challenge for everyone. I want you to start creating a list of any potential partners who you think you would like to work with. Like, reach for the sky. On my partner list right now, on my vision board, is Nike. That's who I want to work with. So reach for the sky, write them all down, let them flow. Don't judge them, just keep it going. If you're brave enough, feel free to share it with me via email. I know that Jules is going to send my email with the slide after this. What we can do now is kind of spend the rest of the time answering questions and unpacking and kind of getting into that deeper level here for you individually. But if you are thinking you want to be the 20% and you would like a one-on-one chat with me, Jules, I know, would also send the link where we can see where you are at in your individual position, and then you can book a time to chat. So thank you all so much for attending and being engaging. It's been amazing. Let's go back over to you, Jules, our amazing host.
Oh, thank you so much, Steph. That was really interesting, and I'm sure that everyone's got a whole lot of questions.
Sure,
I think I might just stop the recording now so that people